All right, let's dive into a topic that I think is one of the most powerful tools for busting through those brick walls in your family tree: Appalachian Guardian Bonds. Tucked away in dusty old courthouse records, these things are so much more than just legal forms. They're a pledge, they're a promise, and honestly, they're a map that can lead you right into the heart of your family's story. I mean, this quote just says it all, doesn't it? It really gets to the core of what we're talking about. These bonds weren't just about shuffling money around. They were this really profound statement of responsibility. They literally marked the moment when a community, through its court, looked at a child's situation and said, okay, we're going to make sure your future is safe.
And really, that's the big question for us today, right? For anyone digging into their family history, these forgotten pledges are like a secret key. They can unlock relationships and reveal these incredible networks of family and neighbors that held everything together when things got tough.
So, first things first, let's really unpack what these documents are all about. And I want you to forget the idea of dry, boring legal text. Instead, think of them as these little snapshots, these compact stories of a family at a really critical moment. You see, every single one of these guardian bonds marks a major life transition. Usually, it's the loss of a parent, but it's always about a big shift in who's responsible for what. So when you follow this paper trail, you're not just finding names and dates, you're uncovering the story of a child's inheritance, the people who swore to protect it, and the entire community that was there to witness it.
Now, to really get why these bonds are so significant, we kind of have to transport ourselves back in time, right into an 18th or 19th century Appalachian courthouse. This wasn't just some stuffy building. It was the hub where business that was absolutely vital to families was conducted.
Okay, so let's get our terms straight, because this is super important. When these records say guardian, it doesn't always mean the person who is tucking the child in at night. More often, they were the legal manager of the child's assets. Think of them as a court-appointed financial protector, there to look after an inheritance until the kid came of age.
And this next one, this is a huge one. It trips up so many researchers. When you see the word orphan in these old records, it can be really jarring. But back then, it very often just meant that the father had passed away. The mother could still be alive and well, raising her kids in the very same house. So don't let that word fool you.
This slide here does a great job of breaking down the court's motivation. See, the court's number one concern wasn't who the child lived with. Physical custody usually stayed with the mom if she was still around. What the court really cared about was protecting property. If a minor suddenly inherited land or money or livestock, the court stepped in to make sure it was managed properly.
So the bond itself was basically a kind of insurance policy. It was a formal, legally binding promise from the guardian, and, this is key, it was co-signed by other respected people in the community called sureties. They were all guaranteeing that the child's stuff would be handled honestly. If the guardian messed up, they were all on the hook financially.
Okay, so this is where it gets really fun for us as genealogists. We need to stop looking at these as just forms and start seeing them for what they really are. They're maps. They're relationship maps of family and community, and this is where the major breakthroughs happen. So, every bond is going to name at least 3 key people, or groups of people. You've got the minor, who is sometimes called the ward, you've got the guardian, who's managing their affairs, and then you have the sureties, the people who vouched for the guardian. Every single name on that page is a clue.
And I gotta tell you, you need to pay very close attention to those sureties. Their names are absolute genealogical gold. Seriously. These were not random people pulled off the street. They were almost always trusted family or very close neighbors. An uncle, maybe an older brother, a father-in-law. Their signature can instantly blow open your family's network and might even help you finally discover a mother's maiden name. So here's a perfect example of how this plays out. We've got a case for a minor named James. His older brother, Thomas, steps up to be the guardian. Okay, that makes sense. But look at the sureties. We've got 2 neighbors, and one of them, Samuel C., has a different last name. Could he be an in-law? Maybe a brother to James's mother? All of a sudden, you've got 3 new names and a whole web of potential relationships to go explore.
So I'm hoping by now you're convinced. But you're probably asking, okay, how do I actually find these records and put them to use? Well, let's walk through the practical steps you can take to turn these old documents into amazing family stories.
The process is actually pretty straightforward. First, you've got to find the right records, usually in probate or county court books. Step 2, you do exactly what we just talked about. Read that bond like it's a relationship map. Then you'll use it to pull out timelines and track property, which is steps 3 and 4. And most importantly, step 5, you have to hunt for all the related paperwork that tells the rest of the story.
So let's jump back to our case study with James. Let's say you're digging through the county probate book and you find that first entry.
It tells you James is the minor heir of John who has died, and his older brother Thomas is now the guardian. Perfect. That's your starting point.
But of course, the bond is just one piece of the puzzle. The very next thing you do is cross-reference it. You pop over to the census records for that time, and what do you find? James's mother is still alive, and she's listed as the head of the household. This instantly confirms that the guardianship was about property, not custody, and it shows you that this family unit was still very much intact after the father's death.
And this is where the story comes full circle. If you dig a little deeper into those court files, you might find a final receipt. And in this case, you do. James, who is now a legal adult at 21, has signed a document saying he's received his full inheritance from his brother. That one piece of paper just closes the entire loop. It's proof of a promise that was made years ago and a promise that was kept.
So what are the big things to remember for your own research? Well, first, just because you find a guardian bond doesn't mean both parents were gone. Remember that orphan definition. Second, use these records to follow the property. It can often explain exactly why a family packed up and moved. And finally, and this is so important, never ever stop at the bond itself. The real, complete story is usually hiding in the follow-up paperwork.
So, when you pull it all together, why does this matter beyond just finding a few more names and dates for your tree? What's the bigger story that these documents are trying to tell us about our Appalachian ancestors?
Well, when you get right down to it, these bonds are all about trust and accountability. They show us a community that really understood the deep connection between family, land, and just plain survival. They didn't just hope for the best. They created a legal system to protect their most vulnerable members and to make sure that obligations were actually met.
This quote really just nails the power of these records. So often in our research, kids are just little tick marks on a census page. But guardian bonds, they pull those children out of the margins and they place them right at the center of their own story. They document this incredibly critical time in their lives, and they show us exactly who stepped up to protect their future.
By following these promises made on paper, we really get to witness how our ancestors handled grief and responsibility. We see family and community working hand in hand to get a child safely to adulthood. So the real question I have for you is, what story of resilience and community is just sitting there waiting for you to find it in an old clerk's book?